Tonight, battle lines drawn in Parliament as Defence Minister attempts to convince NDC minority members to back government's decision to deploy Ghanaian troops as part of ECOWAS military intervention in Niger.
The entire legality of anything that will happen must be of concern to all of us as lawmakers. And at the end of the day, it's about our national interest.
If that's anything to go by.
Article 73 and Article 40 is very clear.
Yes.
We bring you exclusive details from this closed-door security briefing.
This is Top Story with Evans Mensah.
And Top Story is always brought to you by Vodafone. Now, the Defence Minister, Dominic Nittiwell, has today been on a charm offensive in a desperate move to get opposition members of Parliament to back government's decision to deploy Ghanaian troops as part of the ECOWAS military intervention in Niger. Now, Joy News is learning the battle lines were firmly drawn in that closed-door security briefing, with minority MPs rejecting any commitment to deploy Ghanaian troops. They had demanded that the president seeks explicit authorization from Parliament before sending Ghanaian troops in. Today, we have confirmation that ECOWAS is proceeding with its plan to get troops ready for deployment in Niger, where a coup d'etat, as you know, has toppled the democratically elected government of Mohamed Bazoum. In fact, Accra will be hosting the Chiefs of Defence Staff of ECOWAS this week to draw up the plan of attack. We have more on that for you pretty shortly. But you know by now, Ghana is ready to deploy once the green light is given. The Defence Minister, Dominic Nittiwell, himself made that clear.
ECOWAS has given the junta a one-week ultimatum to hand over or face severe consequences, including the use of force. After the 1 week, we will seek the direction of the presidents exactly what they will do. But I can say that the member states are ready. If it means using force, the member states will be ready to do that. As I said, we're waiting for the direction from the commander-in-chiefs of the various armed forces across the globe. And if the decision is to use force, the armed forces of every country will contribute troops to use that force.
Well, Blazer Soga, who heads our foreign affairs desk, was there for us monitoring this very important security briefing in Parliament and joins me in the studio now with details of this. Blazer, why has this become necessary after the Defence Minister had already told us that we were ready to join ECOWAS to deploy the troops?
Well, Evans, you recall that at the start of this month, President Akufo-Addo, together with ECOWAS leaders, signed to agree on modalities that will lead to restoring constitutional order in Niger. And part of the agreement was that there will be a deployment of a military team or troops that will restore constitutional order if within a week the military regime in Niger does not hand over power. That did not happen. Fast forward, ECOWAS decided again to move forward diplomatically to engage the military team in Niger. That also did not happen. And so now ECOWAS has given that green light for, quotes, the activation of a force that will be contributed by all West African countries to restore constitutional order. Throughout these engagements at the regional and sub-regional level, the argument from the minority side has been that the president has failed to consult, and also has failed to consult members of parliament who are critical stakeholders in the way forward on contributing troops to the ECOWAS sub-region. So I believe that it's part of the reason for which today government sent a delegation to engage MPs, but not the entire House, but representatives from the Defence and also the Foreign Affairs Committee. So that's what transpired.
So
today.
who specifically was in this meeting?
So at the start of the meeting, it was clear that this was a meeting being spearheaded by the Defence Minister, because the Defence Minister himself was there, knowing that this would be a military action if the President decides to go forward. There was also the National Security Minister, Honorable Albert Kanapa, who was also present at this meeting. Then we had a representative of the Foreign Affairs Minister, in the person of the Deputy, Honorable Amprichum who was also in this meeting, forming part of the delegation from the government side, to meet a cross-section of members of the Defense and Interior Committee, one, and then we had a joint meeting, now having the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament also coming together to engage with the government delegation.
Okay, so I guess supposedly is to get their buy-in to what government is planning to do if ECOWAS says let's go, and we'll come to what the security chiefs of ECOWAS are planning to do later this week. But you picked up some significant chatter of some deep divisions that emerged in that closed-door meeting. What more do we know?
Okay, so the meeting started somewhere around 9 in the morning. This would take us all the way through to midday. So it does tell you that a lot was on the table to discuss, knowing that there are, divided opinions as to whether or not, first of all, the decision itself is the right thing for the sub-region to do. The MPs went, beyond that, because now it's confirmed that our president, has committed the country to an international agreement, or a treaty, if you want to call it as such, that ECOWAS will now have to deploy troops. So that became the subject of controversy. The fact that the president is committing Ghanaian soldiers to go and fight, quote unquote, a war, and what will be the modus and what's the constitutional requirement. That then generated a heated debate between the majority side and the minority side. Now, Evans, what's interesting is that these two parties do not seem to disagree with the fact that, yes, the president has to enter negotiations on behalf of the country, but they all have a challenge about the constitutional interpretation of Article 40 of our Constitution and what it says. Whilst the majority side is siding with Article 40D, which we'll get into details shortly, the minority believes that it should be Article 40C, which precedes 40D. Now, what's the stipulation within the Constitution when it comes to Article 40C? Now, Article 40 basically talks about how we can conduct our international affairs. But when you come to C, the C talks about the fact that the country must promote respect for international law, treaties, and obligations. And the settlements of international disputes as well must be done by, quote, peaceful means. That's the requirement, peaceful means. Now, the majority side says that the president has no option, because even if you take a peaceful means as the caveat, there is D, which says that our country must, quote, and that's a strong word, adhere to the principles enshrined in, or as the case may be, when it comes to the aims and ideals of, first of all, the United Nations, the African Union, the Commonwealth, and then explicitly you find ECOWAS being mentioned in that article. So the president cannot opt out. That is where the division all started from.
Okay, and this was closed door, and understand they had sworn an oath to be quiet and not speak.
Gentleman's agreement, actually.
Yes, but we got some clarity on where the battle lines possibly are being drawn.
Precisely. We spoke to Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa, who's been talking to us. He's of the opinion that not just Article 40 of the Constitution, but also Article 73 of the Constitution is clear on what the requirements are and how the president must engage on this matter.
The entire legality of anything that will happen must be of concern to all of us as lawmakers. And at the end of the day, it's about our national interest.
If that's anything to go by.
Article 73 and Article 40 is very clear.
Yes.
Our national interest must be at the center of any decision, our national interest. And don't forget, Article 40C encourages peaceful resolutions of matters.
But if you go to D, we are to adhere with whatever decision the sub-regional body ECOWAS.
So as I've told you, the matters are very sensitive and delicate, and that's why.
But I'm talking about law, because that, I heard that come up on the committee. That this is a matter of law. It will come up strongly at you as the matter.
As you do know, consultations are going to continue on this matter. This is a very sensitive matter, and since we have a collective agreement that we will not divulge the details at this point, I think that we should go with that.
Well, while we have this conversation, the ECOWAS is going ahead to draw up the plan of attack, and Ghana is playing host possibly to this plan being drawn up.
So you recall that I was pointing out to the last meeting that ECOWAS held. The active word they used there is to activate the ECOWAS standby force, which means that now it is confirmed that they will indeed form that standby force with a command. And once that command is formed, anytime the order is given for deployment, then the team is readying itself. So it appears that the Ghana military or the Ghana Armed Forces are also part of that exercise. So there's a statement signed by the Lieutenant Colonel that's the Director General of Public Affairs for the Ghana Armed Forces, Amate, pointing out, and I just want to read out what it says, that the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, Committee of Chiefs of Defense Staff, will hold an extraordinary meeting from Thursday, which is just 2 days away, to Friday, 18th of August. And this is happening at the military headquarters, Bema Camp, here in Accra. And it explains, obviously, that yes, indeed, ECOWAS is proceeding with that planned deployment. As to when that directive will come, this is what we're not too sure.
The chiefs want to be ready. They want to have the plan available for, say, our commander-in-chief, the president, and Akufo-Addo.
And in fact, we must point out, Evans, that the meeting was scheduled for an earlier date, which should have occurred.
To be specific, on Saturday.
On Saturday.
But it didn't happen. One source had told us that it didn't happen because they wanted to explore a bit more the diplomatic options.
Other sources are also indicating to us that it's got to do with logistics. And that's why experts are also raising concerns about the deployment. If you have an external factor supporting you in terms of logistics, it may then draw you into a proxy war, which many experts are alarmed about.
Okay, so as of tonight, as we know, the government, led by the defense minister, is now on the charm offensive, trying to get the minority side to buy in to the decision to go to war, and that has to be put bluntly. And by the way, let's put this in context. The reason why the word war has been used is that, as we've heard from Mali, the military junta in Mali, and from Burkina Faso, they have committed
they say that any attempt to send a troop into Niger would mean declaration of war against Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger.
Okay, and so this really brings us to the brink of war, really. ECOWAS against these three nations, and I call them the Junta Alliance. I want to bring in our experts into this conversation because, as we're learning, this is moving pretty quickly with what has happened today in Parliament. Clearly, this meeting, as we've been learning, an attempt to get the MPs to buy in means we are on the brink, with the chiefs now about to meet this Thursday and Friday to draw up this plan. I want to bring in Professor P.J. Chia. He is a senior law lecturer at the University of Ghana. He, of course, has great international relations expertise as far as the laws governing that area is concerned. Also joining us for a conversation is Colonel Festus Abuaji. He is an author. He is also a security and conflict analyst, and also joins us with his thoughts on this as well. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time here on Top Story. And Colonel, tell me what you make of the developments tonight, considering that the defense minister is now reaching out to the other side in Parliament, trying to get them on board here. Good move?
Well, I think he's probably trying to now normalize the statement he made by declaring that Ghana was going to be part of an ECOWAS intervention ahead of a statement from the president. And I've emphasized that there is no democracy where defense ministers or defense secretaries declare war. And in those democracies, presidents or executives go to their legislatures in order to have the sanction of their legislatures. So what we're doing now is trying to normalize the procedure. Well, somebody who spoke, I think the minority MP, said that they have sworn to, let me say, confidentiality, not to disclose what the discussions were about. But it is not for any reason that the article that your presenter put forward on international relations, Article 40, emphasizes or puts at the center the national interest of Ghana. So the debate must be about, does an intervention in Niger promote or serve Ghana's national interest? And that discussion must also explain the risk that Ghana, in all likelihood, is going to face that might be injurious to our national interest. But even having said that, it says that, first of all, we must pursue peaceful settlement of international disputes. Now, I disagree with anybody who says that 10 to 20 days or so after ECOWAS said that the CNSP must hand over power, and they have not handed over power, it means that the diplomatic options or channels have been exhausted. Any diplomat will tell you that that is not how diplomacy works. It's up and down, give and take, and so on. It takes time. And I've had the occasion to say that in Liberia, it took us from January of 1990 until August, September before we went to Liberia. In the case of the Gulf War, when America declared war, it took about 30 days when America, was preparing. As part of putting what Ambassador Musa Patel said, strategic ambiguity. So I don't think that we have fully exhausted the diplomatic channels. Part of the problem is that ECOWAS departed from the tested diplomatic principle. For ECOWAS, first of all, you suspend. And suspension has always been the road to follow when there has been a coup. Then you impose sanctions. Then you engage constructively. And then you deploy other coercive tools. In this case, we ran from 0 to 100 and declared sanctions and the use of the threat of force, And then now we're coming back to say, okay, let's give diplomacy a chance. It doesn't work that way. I'm also suggesting that there is nowhere under any international treaty, not even the UN Charter, that because you are a signatory party to an international treaty, all decisions of that party will be binding on you willy-nilly.
And that is the legal conundrum that has been thrown up today, even in this closed-door meeting. Kenneth, please stay with me. Let me bring in Professor Pejetua on that particular point. Prof, so yes, they had sworn to a code of secrecy in this meeting, but at least we got a word from Mr. Kudita Blaka, who is a ranking on the Foreign Affairs Committee, that gave us a hint as far as where the lines are being drawn. And it's been drawn around Article 40, mainly in one breath. 40C says, in our international dealings, we must promote the respect for international law, treaty obligations, and the settlement of international disputes by peaceful means. So if you are a minority member tonight, you are arguing, just as we've heard Ken Officer Baji make the point there, that explore that first and exhaust that. But the government had made the point that D says we must adhere to the principles enshrined in, or as the case may be, the aims and ideals of ECOWAS, together with all the other international bodies that we've ascribed to. So help us resolve this conflict there. The government is saying we must go. If ECOWAS says let's go, let's go. We don't have a choice in the matter. But then the minority says, well, the peaceful option must be explored first. How do you resolve this?
Thank you. I think we can resolve it actually by not drawing a line between Article 40C and Article 40D. I think the two go together because, as Professor Bwaji has said, diplomacy should be part of the discussion. Okay, but in such situations, if you want to go straightly by the principle of international law, what we understand is that Ghana is a state party to the ECOWAS. And ECOWAS has made a decision that we are going to war. I'm not saying we are going to war, but we want to restore democracy in Niger. The question is, on what basis is ECOWAS making that claim? It comes down to the question of recognition of government. ECOWAS is saying that we don't recognize the government of Chiani and because of the fact that they have come to power through illegal means. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights has made a ruling that if a coup d'etat takes place, it violates the sovereign will of the people and it violates the self-determination of the people. And so it is in violation of international law. So ECOWAS says we are not giving recognition to the government. That means that they rather recognize legally the government of Bazoum. And so Bazoum is saying that I want you to come in to restore the democracy in my country. And so ECOWAS has that power to make that decision. And members of ECOWAS are obliged to abide by the decision made by ECOWAS. You know, ECOWAS has even acquired at this stage extra powers in terms of being supranational. So what it means is that any decision that is taken becomes binding on a member state without having to go through the local procedures of a particular country. And Article 75 of our Constitution, if it is a treaty, it has to go through ratification by Parliament. But ECOWAS supranational status says that we don't need that procedure. So the moment the decision is taken, it becomes binding on member states. Of course, member states can decide to comply or not to comply. But to adhere to Article 4H, which at Article 40D, it means that Ghana, as a law-abiding country, can comply with that decision. And so, to me, when we talk about 40C, it also talks about peaceful means. And that is where that process should be explored. I'm not for military intervention, but legally speaking, that option is available to ECOWAS, and Ghana is supposed to comply with that.
What do you make of the view by some?
We haven't exhausted the democratic process, diplomatic processes, and that should be given more chance to prevail.
Okay, but then that question comes in. I mean, nobody defines exactly how long that should take, right? ECOWAS believes the 1 week ultimatum has been given. They've attempted to go in and negotiate and explore that option a bit more. They failed because obviously the junta will not entertain them and coming in, and so they've hit a wall. A decision has to be taken now. Let's plan and let's put the threat of force firmly on the table, and let's go in if we have to.
Well, I'm not sure the diplomatic process has been exhausted, and I have the feeling that ECOWAS is adopting an approach similar to what they did in the case of the Gambia, where they marched some troops on the border, and that was enough to put some fear into Jammeh to decide to relinquish his position. And so I think that they are adopting a carrot and stick approach, whereby they are still exploring diplomatic options by saying that in the case of last resort, this is what we're going to do. I think that if ECOWAS would decide that we are intervening immediately militarily, that is going to be a mess. Already we know some of the humanitarian issues coming up. And so it would be in the wisdom of ECOWAS not to rush into a military decision and to go military to intervene. But I think that is a strategy they want to use as a way of pushing the military regime to come to the negotiating table, because we know how it has come up with some decisions. For example, that it wants to try Bazoum for high treason and so on. So they are trying to push the North to say that this is where we stand. ECOWAS also wants to flex its muscle and say that this is also where we stand. So I think at the end of the day, both sides should agree on exploring diplomatic options to resolve the issue.
But there's a
interestingly,
view. Please proceed.
Interestingly, the AU has set up guidelines and rules to follow in case there's a military change of government or a coup d'etat. For example, they will not immediately give recognition to the party, to the military regime that has come to power. It will give the option to meet the regime and to negotiate for a return to constitutional rule. And so during this period, some sanctions are imposed, and then there is some measure of, for example, the country may be suspended from membership of the AU and the ECOWAS, and then through that negotiations take place. The military regime will say that we are returning the country to constitutional rule. Then new elections will be held, maybe within 6-month period, and so on. Then in that case, that some solution is arrived at. The weakness with that approach, though, is that no space is given to the overthrown government to take part in the elections that the new regime would try to come up with. So that is some weakness with that AU approach, which needs to be rectified. And then also the question of whether the military regime should take part in the elections, because that is also a situation where normally they will use that opportunity to still remain in power and civilianize themselves.
And Prof, on the Ghana question, though, I mean, there's a view by some of the minority members that even under no circumstance should we be deploying Ghanaian troops, Ghanaian soldiers into Niger for this particular intervention. Is that a position that is tenable, can be sustained in considering a decision we anticipate that ECOWAS decides to deploy?
I don't think there's a legal basis to say that Ghana cannot go with ECOWAS to intervene. There is no legal basis for that. But I think that we should not adopt that legalistic approach. We should give room for democracy, because diplomacy is also recognized under Article 73 and Article 40 of the Constitution.
And Ken Officer Budget, considering that the ECOWAS defense chiefs are meeting on Thursday and Friday, if you put your expert military hat on, where does that put us when it comes to our proximity to war, to deployment? Once you're meeting on Thursday to put up a plan of attack, how close does that put us to the brink of war now?
If you may permit me, and I'm glad that the conversation indicated that Ghana is a rule-based country and so on and so forth. The extension of that is that in that communique of the 10th, which I said is very terse, nonetheless, ECOWAS requested the endorsement or support of the AU and the UN. Now, yesterday, the AU Peace and Security Council met and was divided. That's how one source put it. The other source said that there was no consensus. They couldn't arrive at a decision on supporting or not supporting the ECOWAS intervention. That's a big stumbling block. But ultimately, the type of intervention that we're talking about falls squarely under Chapter 7 provisions of the UN Charter. And I've explained that for that resolution to pass, 9 out of the 15 members will have to support the resolution endorsing ECOWAS's decision to, intervene in Niger. But all five of the permanent members must be part of the 9. You'll be out of your mind to think that Russia, under this circumstance, is going to support the intervention. And China may abstain. Whichever way it goes, the 5 out of the 9 provision will not pass. Now, on the UN Security Council, Ghana currently is part of the A3 with Mozambique and Gabon. I'm not an expert on UN, voting and so on. But if Ghana even cast a supporting vote, it's not very clear that Mozambique and Gabon will do the same. So getting the 9 votes out of the 15 of the Security Council will be impossible. Now, are those suggesting that Ghana can ignore the ECOWAS decision? Also suggest that Ghana can ignore the decision of the Security Council if it happens to be that the Security Council does not support the ECOWAS intervention. So there are legal and the international law. There are very serious legal hurdles that we need to cross. And
indeed, Ken Officer Subaji, a lot of legal hurdles as well. And then logistically as well, even if we decide to go, do we have what it takes to go in and join at a time of great economic crisis? Ken Officer Subaji, thank you very much. And I know you'll join us again at 9 p.m. because I want to expand this a bit more. And then on the day when we've seen talks underway to try and get the opposition party on board with this, with the security chiefs also scheduled to meet on Thursday and Friday, where does that leave us when it comes to proximity to actual deployment? Please join us at 9 p.m. Ken Officer Baji will join me as we explore this a bit more. Professor Kwadwo Pidietua as well will join as we begin to digest this. James Agaga, he is a ranking member on the Defense and Interior Committee, will also join. ECOWAS military action in Niger. Can Ghana afford to deploy? Is a question that we're exploring at 9.
Hey, you ever buy credits where you get up to 20% of your money back before? Make I tell you about Vodafone's demo promo. See, anytime you recharge a demo, you get up to 20%, whether it be short code or your Vodafone cash wallet, or you use credit transfer to your number or someone else. And now you be high tech, so you use my Vodafone app or any payment app. However you do, Vodafone go send you up to 20% cash back into your Vodafone cash account. Who reload here? But then you enter. Top up your airtime with 5 Ghana cedi or more in Vodafone's demo promotion and receive 20% of your money back straight into your Vodafone cash wallet. Recharge and cash out in the Vodafone demo promotion.
Vodafone, further together.